When my child informed me to locate another place for my final days, stating I served no purpose anymore, I gathered my belongings like the compliant parent I had consistently been. 3 days afterward, I found myself seated in an attorney's chambers, learning that my allegedly devoted spouse had executed the most extended strategic game imaginable. Victoria was on the verge of discovering that occasionally the minor piece transforms into the monarch. Should you be viewing this content, please subscribe and inform me of your location. Allow me to explain my journey from destitute widow to the individual controlling all advantages. Because, darling, this narrative contains more reversals than a twisted bread manufacturer. 8 weeks prior, I existed as Margaret Sullivan, dedicated spouse of 43 years and parent to one remarkably thankless child. When Robert experienced fatal cardiac arrest at 71, I believed my existence was concluding. Victoria descended during my mourning period like a scavenger in expensive garments, expressing sympathy about how challenging this situation must prove for me. "Mother, you cannot feasibly maintain this large residence independently," she had stated, her tone overflowing with artificial worry. "The stairways, the upkeep, all those recollections. It proves unhealthy." I should have recognized the calculation underlying her worry. Victoria had consistently been Robert's preferred child, his small royal who could commit no errors. When she wed that financial professional Kevin and began bearing grandchildren, Robert lavished attention on them entirely. Meanwhile, I remained merely the individual who prepared meals and maintained cleanliness, and kept operations functioning seamlessly. Following the burial ceremony, Victoria grew progressively, demanding regarding my circumstances. She would transport Kevin over for evening meals, where they would trap me with property materials and retirement facility information. "Mother, these establishments prove wonderful. You would have individuals your age, pursuits, no obligations." What they intended was no estate to divide, no troublesome parent to manage. The ultimate strike arrived last Tuesday. I had been residing in what Victoria presently labeled our residence for 6 weeks since Robert's passing, still resting in the visitor chamber because I could not endure packing our bedroom. Victoria arrived unexpectedly with Kevin and 2 substantial luggage pieces. "Mother, we have reached a conclusion. Kevin obtained the advancement and we require relocating into town immediately. This residence proves perfect for us." I observed her, not entirely understanding. "Relocate here. However, this represents my dwelling." Victoria's disguise slipped for merely a moment, exposing the frigid calculation beneath. "Actually, Mother, according to Father's testament, I inherited everything. The residence, the financial holdings, all of it. I have been permitting you to remain here from generosity. But the moment has arrived for you to locate your own accommodation." The words struck me like a physical assault. "Victoria, surely some error has occurred." "No error. Father knew I would manage better care of his legacy than you ever could. You never comprehended finances or investments. You were merely the spouse, merely the spouse." 43 years reduced to those 3 words. That moment she delivered the devastating strike. "Locate somewhere else for your final days. You serve no purpose now." I gathered my possessions in a day. 43 years of matrimony fitting into 2 luggage pieces and a small container of photographs. Victoria observed from the entrance, examining her timepiece like I was causing her tardiness for something significant. "There exists a pleasant senior complex on Maple Street," she provided with the enthusiasm of someone suggesting a decent restaurant. "Very economical. I remain confident they have vacancies." Economical, my child was inheriting $33 million, and she was proposing I examine into what was essentially a welfare establishment for the aged. Kevin loaded my luggage into their luxury automobile with the efficiency of someone disposing of refuse. "Margaret, you will appreciate having your independence again," he stated, not entirely meeting my vision. No more concerns about residence maintenance or property assessments. No more dwelling, he intended. As we departed, I observed my residence, Robert's residence, Victoria's residence presently, disappear in the rear viewing glass. The contradiction was not overlooked by me. I had spent 4 decades making that residence a dwelling, hosting Victoria's birthday celebrations, nursing Robert through his sickness, maintaining every detail he valued. Presently, I was being transported to a budget lodging facility, like an unwanted visitor who had exceeded her welcome. The Sunset Inn was precisely what you would anticipate from a place charging $49 nightly. Thin partitions, thinner towels, and a floor covering that had witnessed better decades. Victoria handed me $200 in currency like she was tipping a lodging servant. "This should provide for you for several days while you get established," she stated. "I will have Kevin transfer some funds into your account once we sort through Father's documentation. Some funds for my own estate." After they departed, I sat on the sagging sleeping surface and attempted to process what had just occurred. In the duration of 3 hours, I had gone from grieving widow to homeless senior citizen. The individual I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for had discarded me like an expired medication. However, as I sat there in that depressing lodging chamber, something began troubling me. Robert had consistently been meticulous about his matters, obsessively organized about important documentation. He had shown me the testament years prior, explaining his desires, making certain I understood everything, and I was absolutely certain that is not what it had stated. Robert had been many things: traditional, sometimes stubborn, occasionally patronizing about financial matters. However, he was not cruel. The individual who had held my hand through my mother's passing, who had surprised me with flowers every anniversary, would not have left me destitute. The following morning, I used the lodging's wireless internet to search for Robert's attorney, Harrison Fitzgerald, the same lawyer who had handled our residence purchase and various business matters over the years. His chambers were downtown, a 20-minute bus journey that cost me precious currency, but felt necessary. Harrison Fitzgerald was a distinguished individual in his 70s, with kind vision behind wire-rimmed glasses. When his secretary announced that Mrs. Sullivan was present about her spouse's estate, he looked genuinely surprised. "Margaret, my dear, I was wondering when you would arrive. I attempted calling your residence several occasions, but Victoria stated you were traveling. Traveling. That is what my child had told him. Mr. Fitzgerald, I need to inquire you about Robert's testament." He looked puzzled, of course. "Did Victoria not provide you with your copy?" I gave her the original and several copies after the reading. My stomach dropped. There was a reading. "Margaret, you were supposed to be present. Victoria stated you were too distraught that she would handle everything and make certain you received your estate." The blood drained from my face as the reality struck me. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I was never informed about any reading. Victoria told me she inherited everything." Harrison Fitzgerald's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. He reached for a thick file folder, his movements suddenly urgent. "Margaret, that proves impossible. Your spouse's testament is very specific about your estate." He pulled out a document I recognized, Robert's neat signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. However, as Harrison began reading, I realized Victoria had lied about everything. "I, Robert James Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved spouse Margaret Ann Sullivan the following: our primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, I leave her 70% of all financial assets, investments and accounts, totaling approximately $23 million. My head started spinning. $23 million. The residence, 70% of everything. Harrison continued reading, his tone growing more serious. "To my child, Victoria Sullivan Hayes, I leave $10 million to be held in trust, with distributions beginning on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her treatment of her mother following my passing, contingent upon her treatment of me." Robert had known, somehow he had known precisely what Victoria would attempt to do. "Mr. Fitzgerald," I whispered. "Victoria told me I inherited nothing. She relocated into my residence. She gave me $200 and suggested I locate a senior facility." The elderly lawyer's face flushed with anger. "Margaret, what Victoria has done is called elder abuse and fraud. She has committed multiple felonies, but she had legal documentation, forged most likely or documents from an earlier draft. Your spouse updated his testament 6 months before his passing, specifically because he was concerned about Victoria's attitude toward finances and her sense of entitlement." The chamber was spinning. All those occasions Victoria had dismissed my opinions, talked over me during family evening meals, rolled her vision when I attempted to contribute to conversations about their expensive vacations or Kevin's business dealings. Robert had been observing, evaluating, making conclusions. "There exists more, Margaret. The trust provision for Victoria specifically states that if she fails to treat you with respect and dignity following my passing, the entire $10 million reverts to you instead." I stared at him in shock. "Are you stating I am? Stating your child just cost herself $10 million? Her estate is presently yours as well? You are not inheriting $23 million, Margaret. You are inheriting $33 million plus the residence and all personal property." The contradiction was so perfect it was almost humorous. Victoria had been so eager to claim her estate that she had triggered the precise clause designed to protect me from her greed. "What do I do presently?" I asked, my tone barely steady. Harrison smiled, and for the first occasion since Robert's passing, I saw genuine warmth directed at me. "Presently, my dear, we call the police about the fraud, and then we call Victoria and inform her that she is about to receive the shock of her life. Can she fight this? With what finances? She is about to discover that every account she thought she controlled actually belongs to you. Every investment, every bank account, every asset except your residence is frozen pending investigation of her fraudulent activities." I thought about Victoria in my residence, probably already planning renovations. shopping for new furniture with finances she thought were hers. Kevin was probably calculating how the estate would affect his investment portfolio. They had no idea that in about 6 hours their entire world was going to implode. Harrison Fitzgerald's chambers became command central for what he cheerfully labeled Operation Justice. He contacted the police, the banks, and a private investigator while I sat in his leather chair, still processing the magnitude of Victoria's deception. The forged documentation proves quite sophisticated, Detective Rodriguez explained as she reviewed the fake testament Victoria had shown me. This was not a spur-of-the-moment crime. Someone planned this carefully. You think Victoria had assistance? I asked. Almost certainly. Creating convincing legal forgeries requires specific knowledge and connections. We will need to investigate whether Kevin or someone in his financial network was involved. Within 2 hours, every account had been frozen. Victoria's credit cards linked to what she thought were her new estate accounts were declined. The residence utilities, which she had already transferred to her name, were suspended, pending ownership verification. My telephone rang at precisely 3:47 in the afternoon. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Mother, where are you? There exists some kind of mix-up with the bank accounts. They are stating father's assets are frozen. Hello, Victoria. I am sitting in Harrison Fitzgerald's chambers. You remember him? Father's attorney? The one who read the real testament to an empty chamber while you told him I was traveling? Silence then. Mother, I do not know what you think you discovered, but I discovered that you are a liar and a thief, sweetheart. I also discovered that your father was much smarter than either of us realized. You do not understand. I was protecting you from the complexity of managing all that finances. You have never had to deal with investments, or I understand perfectly. You forged legal documentation, committed fraud, and threw your 67-year-old mother out of her own residence because you thought I was too stupid to notice. Her tone turned sharp, desperate. Mother, you are confused. The grief has been overwhelming and someone is obviously taking advantage of your emotional state. The audacity was breathtaking. Even caught red-handed, Victoria was attempting to manipulate me. Victoria, dear, let me clarify something for you. Not only did you never inherit anything, but your actual estate, the $10 million your father left you, is presently mine as well, thanks to a lovely clause he included about treating me with dignity and respect. That proves impossible. Detective Rodriguez is sitting right here if you would like to discuss the impossibility of fraud charges with her. The telephone went quiet. I could almost hear Victoria's mind racing, calculating, searching for an angle. Mother, please, can we meet somewhere and talk about this reasonably? I remain confident we can work something out. Oh, we will definitely be meeting soon at the courthouse when you are arraigned. You would not dare press charges against your own child. Something cold and final crystallized in my chest. Watch me. I hung up and looked at Harrison, who was beaming with approval. How long before she is arrested? Detective Rodriguez has enough evidence for a warrant. They will pick her up this evening. And Kevin, his financial records are being subpoenaed. If he participated in creating those documents, he will face charges too. My telephone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Mother, please do not do this. Think about the grandchildren. I showed the message to Detective Rodriguez, who smiled grimly. Emotional manipulation. Classic behavior pattern for this type of crime. I typed back. I am thinking about them. They deserve to see what happens when you steal from family. 20 minutes afterward, Kevin called. Margaret, surely we can resolve this privately. Victoria made some poor decisions, but involving the police seems excessive. Kevin, did you help her forge those documents? That proves not Margaret. You have to understand the pressure Victoria was under. She was worried about your mental state, your ability to handle large sums of finances. So, that represents a yes. It was not malicious. She genuinely believed she was protecting you by throwing me out of my residence and telling me to locate somewhere to die. Kevin was quiet. Kevin, here exists. What is going to happen? You are both going to be arrested. You are both going to face federal fraud charges, and I am going to be sitting in my residence, watching it all unfold. Margaret, please be reasonable. I was reasonable for 43 years. It did not work out well for me. The police arrested Victoria at 8:30 in the evening while she was having dinner at a fancy establishment, apparently celebrating her estate with Kevin and another couple. According to Detective Rodriguez, she screamed about false arrest and demanded to call her lawyer, who turned out to be Kevin's golf buddy and had no experience with criminal law. Kevin was arrested at his chambers the following morning. The forensic accountant had traced the forged documentation to a printing company, Kevin's firm used for creating fraudulent investment documents. Apparently, my son-in-law had quite the criminal resume that Victoria either did not know about or chose to ignore. I spent my first night back in my residence in 43 years, resting in the master bedroom. Victoria had already relocated her belongings into the space, replacing Robert's careful organization with her chaos of designer clothes and expensive cosmetics. I packed everything into garbage bags and left them on the front porch. Let her collect them when she makes bail. The residence felt different presently, not because Robert was gone, but because I was finally seeing it as mine. For decades, I had maintained it as Robert's sanctuary, designed around his preferences, his needs, his vision of how we should live. Presently, looking around with clear vision, I realized how little of me had ever been reflected in these chambers. That was about to change. Harrison called around noon with updates. Victoria's bail is set at $50,000. Since all her accounts are frozen, she will have to locate someone else to cover it. What about Kevin? $200,000. Apparently, the judge was not impressed with his history of financial crimes. Who knew your son-in-law had been under investigation for securities fraud? I certainly had not known. However, then again, I had been excluded from most family financial discussions. Victoria and Kevin had consistently spoken to me like I was a child when finances came up, simplifying concepts they assumed I could not understand. They were about to learn how much I had actually understood. Harrison, I want to make some changes to the residence. Victoria had contractors lined up to renovate. I would like to proceed with some of those plans, but with my own vision. Excellent idea. It represents your dwelling presently, Margaret. Do whatever makes you happy. What made me happy, I realized, was the idea of undoing every assumption Victoria had made about my estate. She planned to gut the kitchen, replace the hardwood floors, and convert Robert's study into a wine storage area. I was going to turn the study into an art studio and the wine storage area plans into a library. My telephone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Janet Cooper from Channel 7 News. We understand you represent the victim of a significant elder fraud case involving your child. Would you be willing to share your story? Word was getting out. In a city this size, the arrest of a prominent investment banker and his spouse for defrauding his elderly mother-in-law was news. Ms. Cooper, I appreciate your interest, but I am not ready to make public statements. I understand this must be difficult, but your story could help other seniors recognize warning signs of family financial abuse. She had a point. How many other individuals my age were being manipulated by adult children who saw them as inconvenient obstacles to estate? If I decided to tell my story, would I have control over how it is presented? Absolutely. We could arrange a sit-down interview where you would have approval over the final edit. I thought about Victoria probably sitting in a jail cell right presently, still believing this was all a misunderstanding. She could charm her way out of. Miss Cooper, let me get back to you. I might have quite a story to tell. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine Kevin had sent us for Christmas. Wine I was apparently presently drinking in my own residence, purchased with my own finances. While contemplating whether to publicly humiliate my child on television, life had certainly taken an interesting turn. The doorbell rang at 7:00 in the morning, sharp. Through the window I could see Victoria on my front porch wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like she had aged 5 years overnight. She had made bail somehow. I opened the door but did not invite her in. Mother, please, we need to talk. We talked yesterday. You told me to locate somewhere to die? I found somewhere to live instead. Victoria's vision were red-rimmed, her usual perfect composure completely shattered. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I remain still, your child. Are you? Because children do not typically forge legal documentation to steal their mother's estates. I was not stealing. I was. She stopped, clearly struggling to locate words that did not sound criminal. You were what, Victoria? I was attempting to protect you from making poor financial decisions. You have never managed large amounts of finances. Even presently, even after being arrested for fraud, she could not admit the truth. In Victoria's mind, she was still the victim of my unreasonable expectations. Victoria, let me share something your father told me 6 months before he passed. He stated he was worried about your sense of entitlement, your attitude toward finances, and how you treated individuals you considered beneath you. Her face went pale. Father never stated that. He stated you reminded him of his sister Eleanor, beautiful, charming, and completely incapable of thinking about anyone but yourself. He told me he was changing the testament specifically because he was afraid of what you would do to me if you had control. That represents a lie. I pulled out my telephone and showed her a voice recording. Actually, it proves not. Your father recorded a video message explaining his decision to be played if you ever contested the testament, or if you treated me poorly after his passing. Victoria stared at the telephone like it was a poisonous snake. He knew, sweetheart. He knew precisely who you were underneath all that charm. The only thing he did not predict was how far you would actually go. Play it, she whispered. I touched the screen and Robert's tone filled the morning air, clear, measured, and absolutely devastating. If you are hearing this, Victoria, it means my fears about your character were justified. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that my child had more integrity than I suspected. However, if Margaret is playing this recording, it means you have proven me right in the worst possible way. Victoria sank onto the porch steps as Robert's tone continued. I spent 43 years watching your mother sacrifice her dreams, her ambitions, her independence to take care of our family. She worked part-time jobs to help pay for your college while I built my business. She postponed her education, gave up career opportunities, and poured herself into being the spouse and mother she thought we needed. The recording continued for 3 more minutes, each word carefully chosen, each sentence a scalpel cutting through Victoria's justifications and self-deceptions. By the occasion you hear this, you will have discovered that treating your mother poorly has cost you everything. I hope it was worth it. When it ended, Victoria was crying, not the pretty tears she had used to manipulate individuals since childhood, but ugly, broken sobs. He hated me, she whispered. No, Victoria, he loved you enough to hope you would prove him wrong. You chose to prove him right instead. She looked up at me, mascara streaking her cheeks. What happens presently? Presently, you face the consequences of your choices, the fraud charges, the investigation, the public humiliation. When this story hits the news Channel 7 wants to interview me about elder financial abuse. I am thinking of stating yes. Victoria's face crumpled completely. Mother, please think about what this will do to the grandchildren, to Kevin's career, to our whole family. I am thinking about it. I am thinking about how you did not consider any of those things when you decided to commit multiple felonies. She stood up slowly, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen her. I know you will not believe this, but I never meant for it to go this far. I wanted the finances. I wanted the security, the status. I wanted to never have to worry about anything again. For the first occasion since this nightmare began, Victoria was telling the truth. I believe you, sweetheart, but wanting something does not justify destroying individuals to get it. She nodded, tears still flowing. What can I do to fix this? You can start by admitting what you did was wrong. Not misguided, not protective, not complicated. Wrong. It was wrong. It was completely, unforgivably wrong. And then you can face whatever consequences come next with some dignity instead of attempting to manipulate your way out of them. Victoria looked at me for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first occasion not the pushover mother she had consistently known, but the individual who just outmaneuvered her completely. I deserved this, did I not? Yes, Victoria, you absolutely did. 3 days after Victoria's porch confession, Kevin's mother showed up at my door. Eleanor Hayes was everything I had expected. Perfectly styled, dripping with jewelry, and radiating the kind of entitlement that only comes from 3 generations of inherited wealth. Margaret, we need to discuss this situation rationally. I invited her in, curious to see what version of reality Hayes' family had constructed to explain their son's felony charges. Eleanor settled herself in my living chamber like she was granting me an audience. Kevin made some poor choices, obviously, but prosecuting him seems rather vindictive. Do you not think? Vindictive? Your son helped steal my estate and threw me out of my own residence. Kevin was following Victoria's lead. He did not understand the full situation. The individual was actually attempting to blame my child for her son's criminal behavior. I had to admire the audacity. Mrs. Hayes, Kevin created forged legal documentation that proves not following someone's lead. That represents conspiracy to commit fraud. Kevin's lawyer believes we can reach a settlement that benefits everyone. You get your residence back. Victoria faces appropriate consequences, and Kevin avoids the publicity of a trial. Appropriate consequences, as if Victoria's crimes were a minor etiquette violation. What kind of settlement? Eleanor smiled, clearly believing she had found an opening. Kevin's family is prepared to compensate you for your inconvenience. Let us state $2 million in exchange for dropping the charges against Kevin. $2 million to forgive the individual who had helped steal $33 million from me. Mrs. Hayes, your son participated in a scheme that cost me everything I owned. You think $2 million covers that, Margaret? Be realistic. Kevin has a career, children, a reputation to maintain. Sending him to prison serves no one. It serves justice. Eleanor's polished facade cracked slightly. Justice. You are destroying multiple families over finances you would never have known how to manage anyway. There it was. The same condescending attitude that had poisoned my relationship with Victoria. In their world, I was just the help who had gotten uppity Mrs. Hayes. I think we are done here. Margaret, please reconsider. $5 million. Final offer. $5 million to let Kevin walk free. The amount was staggering, but the principle was non-negotiable. My answer is no. Eleanor stood, her composure completely restored. Very well, but you should know that Kevin's legal team has found some interesting information about your spouse's business practices. It would be unfortunate if that became public during the trial. The threat was clear, but I felt no fear, only curiosity. What kind of information? The kind that might make you reconsider who the real criminal in this situation was. After she departed, I called Harrison immediately. Margaret, whatever they think they found, it does not change the facts of Victoria and Kevin's crimes. However, could it affect the case? Potentially, if they can muddy the waters enough, create doubt about Robert's character or business practices, it might influence a jury. I thought about Robert, about our marriage, about all the secrets that might be buried in 43 years of shared life. Harrison, I want to know everything about Robert's business. Every deal, every partnership, every potential irregularity. Margaret, are you certain? Sometimes the past is better left alone. The Hayes family is threatening to drag Robert's memory through the mud to protect their criminal son. I would rather know the truth first. That evening, I sat in Robert's study, my study presently, and began going through his files systematically. Robert had been meticulously organized, every document dated and categorized. However, as I dug deeper into his business records, I began finding things that did not quite make sense. Payments to shell companies, consulting fees that seemed excessive, partnerships with firms that appeared to exist only on paper. By midnight, I had discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about my spouse. The private investigator Harrison recommended was a sharp-eyed individual named Carol Chen, who specialized in financial crimes. She spent 6 hours in Robert's study photographing documents and building what she labeled the real picture of my spouse's business empire. Mrs. Sullivan, your spouse was running a sophisticated money laundering operation through his consulting firm. We are talking about millions of dollars in illegal transactions over the past decade. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. That proves impossible. Robert was the most honest individual I knew. I am sorry, but the evidence is overwhelming. He was washing finances for organized crime families, using his legitimate business as a front. I stared at the documentation spread across Robert's desk, invoices for services never rendered, consulting contracts with companies that did not exist, payment schedules that corresponded with known criminal activities. How long has this been going on? Based on these records, at least 12 years, probably longer. 12 years, while I was planning dinner parties and attending charity events, my spouse was facilitating criminal enterprises. Mrs. Sullivan, and there exists more. The $10 million Robert left Victoria, that finances came directly from laundered funds. If the FBI discovers this, they will seize everything as proceeds of criminal activity. The chamber started spinning. Everything. The residence, the investments, all of it. Unless what? Carol looked uncomfortable. Unless Victoria and Kevin's legal team already knows about this and is planning to use it as leverage. If they tip off the FBI about your spouse's crimes, they might be able to negotiate immunity in exchange for cooperation. My child and her spouse were not just thieves, they were holding a nuclear weapon over my head. What are my options? Legally, you could contact the FBI yourself, come forward voluntarily, and hope for leniency. You would lose most of the finances, but you might keep the residence. And if I do not, Victoria and Kevin's lawyers will probably leak this information strategically. You will lose everything anyway, but you will also face potential charges for knowingly benefiting from criminal activity. I thought about Eleanor Hayes' smug confidence, her certainty that I would accept their settlement offer. They had known about Robert's crimes all along. Carol, how did they find out about this? Kevin represents an investment banker. He would have recognized the patterns in your spouse's financial records. The question is, what are they planning to do with this information? My telephone rang. Victoria's number. Mother, we need to meet tonight. There are things you need to know about father that change everything. I already know. Victoria, silence. Then you know what? I know about the money laundering. I know about the criminal connections. I know that everything your father left us is tainted. Mother, listen to me carefully. Kevin's lawyers have been in contact with the FBI. They are willing to let us renegotiate our situation. What kind of renegotiation? Kevin gets immunity in exchange for providing information about father's criminal network. You get to keep $5 million and the residence. The rest goes to the government. And you, the fraud charges disappear. We all walk away from this mess. It was brilliant in a sociopathic way. Victoria had turned my moral victory into her strategic advantage. Victoria, you are asking me to help you profit from your crimes by exploiting father's crimes. I am asking you to be practical. The alternative is losing everything and potentially facing charges yourself. I looked around Robert's study, seeing it clearly for the first occasion. The expensive furniture, the rare books, the art collection, all of it purchased with blood finances. I need time to think. Mother, the FBI meeting is tomorrow morning. Kevin's lawyer needs an answer tonight. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness of Robert's study, surrounded by the evidence of his double life. 43 years of marriage to a stranger. A child who had inherited more than finances from her father, she had inherited his talent for deception. However, she had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated who I was when my back was against the wall. I picked up the telephone and dialed Carol Chen. Carol, how quickly can you get me a meeting with the FBI? I have a story to tell them, and I think they are going to find it very interesting. FBI agent Sarah Martinez looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a federal investigator: serious, intelligent, and completely immune to charm. She sat across from me in Harrison's conference chamber, recording our conversation and taking notes with mechanical precision. Mrs. Sullivan, you understand that by coming forward voluntarily, you are potentially admitting to benefiting from criminal proceeds. I understand, but I would rather tell you the truth than let my child and her spouse manipulate this situation to their advantage. I laid out everything: Robert's hidden business, Victoria's fraud scheme, Kevin's forgeries, and the extortion attempt masquerading as a settlement offer. Your child believes she can trade information about your spouse's crimes for immunity from her own charges. That represents exactly what she believes, and she thinks I will cooperate because I am afraid of losing everything. Agent Martinez smiled for the first occasion. Are you afraid, Mrs. Sullivan? Agent Martinez? 2 weeks prior, I was a grieving widow resting in a budget lodging facility. Today, I am sitting here voluntarily confessing to federal agents about my deceased spouse's criminal enterprise. Fear is no longer my primary emotion. What is anger? Pure crystallized anger at being manipulated by individuals who underestimated my intelligence for decades. Agent Martinez's smile widened. Mrs. Sullivan, would you be willing to wear a wire? 3 hours afterward, I was sitting in my living chamber with a recording device taped to my chest, waiting for Victoria and Kevin to arrive for what they thought was a surrender meeting. They knocked at exactly 8:00 in the evening, both dressed like they were attending a business dinner. Kevin carried a briefcase that probably contained immunity agreements and settlement papers. Mother, you look better than you have in weeks, Victoria stated, kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. I feel better. Clarity has that effect. Kevin opened his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who had conducted similar negotiations before. Margaret, our lawyers have structured this very favorably for you. You retain the residence, $5 million in clean assets, and complete immunity from any charges related to Robert's activities. Clean assets. That represents an interesting phrase. Victoria shot Kevin a warning look. Mother, the important thing is that we are all protected. The past stays buried and we all move forward. What about the $33 million Robert actually left me? Mother, that finances is tainted. It cannot be separated from father's criminal activities. Taking $5 million is the best outcome possible, and you too. What do you get out of this arrangement? Kevin leaned forward, his confidence returning. We get to put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us. Victoria's charges disappear. My reputation remains intact and our family can heal. Misunderstanding. He was still calling felony fraud a misunderstanding? Kevin, help me understand something. When exactly did you discover Robert's criminal activities? What do you mean? I mean, did you know about the money laundering when you married Victoria? Or did you discover it recently when you were planning to steal my estate? Kevin and Victoria exchanged glances. Margaret, I do not think that proves relevant to our current discussion. Actually, I think it proves very relevant because if you knew about Robert's crimes and stated nothing, that makes you an accessory after the fact. And if you only discovered them while committing your own crimes, that makes you remarkably unlucky. Victoria's composure was starting to crack. Mother, what are you getting at? I am getting at the fact that you two have been planning this for months, possibly years. The forged testament, the money laundering discovery, even Kevin's connections to document forgers. None of this was spontaneous. That represents ridiculous. Is it? Agent Martinez finds it quite plausible. The color drained from both their faces. Agent Martinez, Kevin whispered. FBI. She has been very interested in my story about systematic elder abuse, fraud, and extortion, particularly the part where you attempted to blackmail me with my deceased spouse's crimes. Kevin stood up abruptly, reaching for his briefcase. Margaret, this conversation is over. Actually, Kevin, I think it is just beginning. Agent Martinez and 2 other federal agents entered my living chamber as Victoria and Kevin sat frozen in place. The briefcase Kevin had been reaching for was confiscated immediately, along with both their telephones. Victoria Sullivan Hayes and Kevin Hayes. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. Victoria turned to me with an expression of absolute betrayal. Mother, how could you do this to your own family? The same way you could forge legal documentation and steal my estate, sweetheart, except my way is legal. As the agents handcuffed them, Kevin tried one last desperate play. Margaret, you do not understand what you have done. There are individuals connected to Robert's business who will not appreciate federal attention. You have put yourself in danger. Agent Martinez paused in reading them their rights. Mr. Hayes, are you threatening a federal witness? I am warning her about the reality of her situation. The reality, Agent Martinez stated, is that you just added witness intimidation to your charges. After they were removed, Agent Martinez sat back down across from me. Mrs. Sullivan, Kevin's warning might not be entirely empty. Your spouse was connected to some dangerous individuals. How dangerous? The Torino crime family, primarily. They have been using legitimate businesses to launder finances for decades. Your spouse's consulting firm was one of their most successful operations. The name meant nothing to me, but the agent's expression told me everything I needed to know. Are you stating I am in actual physical danger? Potentially, but there exists something else you should know about your spouse's operation, something that changes everything. Agent Martinez pulled out a thick file folder, the kind that suggested months of investigation. Mrs. Sullivan, your spouse was not just laundering finances for the Torino family. He was an FBI informant for 12 years, providing information about their operations while appearing to facilitate their money laundering. The world tilted sideways. Robert was working for the FBI. Deep cover, long-term investigation. The operation was so sensitive that even local FBI offices were not informed. Your spouse was helping us build cases against multiple crime families. However, the finances was real. The FBI allowed him to keep a percentage of the laundered funds as payment for his cooperation and, 2, maintain his cover. Everything he left you was earned through legitimate federal cooperation. I stared at her, attempting to process this revelation. So the $33 million is legally mine. Your spouse died before the investigation concluded, but his cooperation over 12 years directly led to 47 arrests and the seizure of over $200 million in criminal assets. Why did nobody tell me? Because the investigation was ongoing and because we were not certain about your involvement or knowledge. Your child and son-in-law's fraud scheme actually helped us confirm your innocence. Victoria and Kevin did not know any of this. They suspected criminal activity, but they had no idea about the federal cooperation. They were planning to blackmail you with information that would have actually exonerated your spouse. The contradiction was so perfect, it was almost poetic. Victoria had attempted to steal my estate twice, once through fraud and once through blackmail based on incomplete information. Agent Martinez, what happens presently? Presently, you get your finances back. Your child and son-in-law face federal charges, and you get to decide what kind of life you want to build with your legitimate estate. And the danger Kevin mentioned, the Torino family will be too busy dealing with their own legal problems to worry about you. We are executing search warrants across 3 states tomorrow morning. I looked around my living chamber, seeing it again as the location of my resurrection rather than my humiliation. Agent Martinez, can I ask you something? Of course. In your professional opinion, am I a terrible individual for feeling satisfaction about Victoria's arrest? Agent Martinez smiled. Mrs. Sullivan, in my professional opinion, you represent an individual who refused to be victimized. That proves not terrible. That proves inspiring. 6 months afterward, I stood in the kitchen of my renovated residence, making coffee for 2. The morning sun streamed through new windows that actually opened properly, illuminating countertops I had chosen myself for the first occasion in 43 years. Good morning, Margaret. Dr. Sarah Chen, Carol S. sister, and my new financial advisor appeared in the doorway carrying a thick folder of investment reports. Good morning, Sarah. Ready for our quarterly review? The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media interviews, and personal transformation. Victoria and Kevin were each serving 18 months federal sentences. The news coverage of their crimes had made me something of a celebrity in senior advocacy circles. Your portfolio is performing excellently, Sarah stated, settling at my new breakfast table. The charitable foundation is fully operational, and the scholarship fund has already selected its first recipients. The Margaret Sullivan Foundation for Elder Protection had become my primary focus. Using $15 million of my estate, we were funding legal aid for seniors facing family financial abuse and supporting legislative changes to strengthen elder protection laws. Any word on the documentary? Netflix confirmed the production deal. They want to start filming next month. My story had captured media attention far beyond the initial news coverage. The Mother's Revenge, an American crime story, was being developed as a limited series with the proceeds going to elder advocacy organizations. And Victoria Sarah's expression grew careful. She has written again. Her lawyer states she wants to apologize and ask for forgiveness. Victoria had written me 17 letters from federal prison. I had read the first few, which ranged from self-justifying to desperate, before deciding to stop opening them. Some relationships once broken cannot be repaired with words. Sarah, has my stance on that changed? Not according to our previous conversations, but individuals do evolve. Margaret, even individuals who have made terrible choices. I thought about the individual I had been 6 months prior, grieving, dependent, willing to accept whatever scraps of dignity my family offered me. That individual might have felt obligated to forgive Victoria, to rebuild a relationship based on guilt and tradition. However, that individual was gone. Sarah, schedule a meeting with Victoria's lawyer. Not to reconcile, but to make something clear. What kind of thing? I want Victoria to understand that her actions had consequences beyond legal punishment. I want her to know that she destroyed our relationship permanently and that her children will grow up knowing why their mother went to prison. That seems harsh. Good. It is supposed to be harsh. Victoria made adult choices that hurt individuals she was supposed to love. She does not get to escape the emotional consequences just because she has written some prison letters. Sarah made notes in her leather portfolio, and the grandchildren, Victoria, has requested supervised visits with them. My relationship with Victoria's children will be based on their choices when they are adults, not their mother's rehabilitation efforts. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a delivery truck with a large package. Must be the new furniture for the studio, I told Sarah. The art studio had been my favorite renovation project. Robert's former den was presently a bright, airy space where I was rediscovering my love of painting, something I had abandoned when I got married and assumed the role of supporting spouse and mother. Margaret, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret how this all played out? The prison sentences, the media attention, the permanent family estrangement. I considered the question while signing for my delivery. 6 months prior, I had been invisible, a widow with no finances, no dwelling, and no prospects. Today, I was a millionaire philanthropist with a foundation, a documentary deal, and a purpose that extended far beyond my own survival. Sarah, my child, attempted to steal everything I owned and leave me homeless. My son-in-law created forged documentation and threatened me with blackmail. They showed me precisely who they were when they thought I was powerless to stop them. However, they remain still family. No, they remain still DNA. Family are the individuals who protect you when you are vulnerable, not the individuals who exploit your vulnerability for profit. Sarah closed her portfolio, satisfied with my response. Besides, I added, look what I became when I stopped allowing them to define my worth. After Sarah departed, I walked through my residence. Really, my residence presently, decorated according to my taste, organized around my priorities. In the art studio, I uncovered my latest painting, a self-portrait of an individual standing in bright sunlight, her face turned toward the future. The individual in the painting looked nothing like the grieving widow who had packed her life into 2 luggage pieces 6 months prior. This individual looked powerful, independent, unafraid. She looked like someone who had learned that the best revenge is not getting even. It is becoming everything your enemies never thought you could be. Outside, the sun was setting behind trees. I had planted myself in soil that belonged to me. On property I had defended through intelligence and courage, rather than inherited through marriage or birth. Tomorrow, I would continue building the life I had chosen, rather than the life others had planned for me. And if Victoria wanted to rebuild a relationship with this individual, she would better bring a lot more than prison letters and hollow apologies. She would better bring a complete transformation, one that matched my own. Thanks for listening. Do not forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.